like to call the meeting of September 29th to order. The first item of business is public comment. Since there is no public comment, let's move on to the approval of the minutes of September the 15th.
I'll make a motion to approve them.
Thank you. Mr. Drury seconds. Are there any revisions or additions?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Suding.
on page 8, item 7, under the motion number 4, the sandstone bases shall be more of a Santa Barbara sandstone color. Strike the words a lighter.
That's what was said, though, in the meeting. So,
Well, it's inaccurate.
well, but that was part of the motion, so if it's inaccurate, that may be the case, but that was part of the motion.
Okay, number 3. Study sitting opportunities on Anapamu Street so that they are more regularly spaced and traditional in form. Anybody have a problem with that? Page 10, item 9. Under the action, Suding opposed because he does not approve of the proliferation of contemporary materials. Strike the word like. And page 12, item number 10, under the motion, 1B, the gabled roof at the center of the elevation is appreciated. So strike the word piece. That is all.
Are there any other revisions or comments? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
I abstain.
Abstain.
Are there any opposed? I believe that, God, can that carry?
Yeah.
Okay, that motion carries. Thank you. The consent calendar.
Madam Chair, signs. Let's see. Thank you. Item A, 17 West Montecito Street, was given positive comments and then continued indefinitely to the staff hearing officer. Item B, 206 East Anapamu Street, was final approval as submitted. Item C, 922 Castero Street, was final approval as submitted. Item D, 509 State Street, was final approval as submitted, and those were reviewed by Commissioner Sharp.
And motion to ratify the calendar.
Motion to ratify the consent.
Mr. Drury seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. That motion carries. Next item is announcements.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's, I keep reading that item. Approval of the minutes of the sign committee of September 15th.
I move to approve the minutes of the sign committee. I'll second that.
Are there any concerns, revisions, anything? Not? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. That motion carries. Now the next item is announcements.
Yes, Madam Chair. Well, Commissioners Adam, Murray, and Schellenberg are being absent, but it looks like Mr. Peugeot is
Yeah. Have we
Still-
perhaps given a call to his
out.
out?
Okay, or maybe he's late. We'll see. And then an appeal has been filed to the City Council of the Historic Landmarks Commission's preliminary approval of the project at 101 West Cannon Perdido Street. The tentative time and date of that appeal is 2 p.m. on Tuesday, November 16th. And that is based on, I believe, the bulb out, which was actually a condition of approval for the lot line adjustment and the tentative subdivision map, which was part of the, I don't know if that was Planning Commissioner, Staff Hearing Officer approval. So it was the land use approval, condition of approval. So I believe they are on the agenda. They're coming in today. They were going to attempt to get final approval. So we are going to instead have it reviewed as an in progress.
I see.
And I believe Mr. Lamone will be here at that time to speak more in detail about the appeal.
No, thank you.
You're welcome. And then I don't...
I will have to abstain from that,
Okay.
so we may not have
We may not have a quorum.
quorum if there's any action taken. If it's discussion,
Well, it'll just be an in progress. So
Okay.
okay.
there won't be any action taken.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yes, Susan. Susan, I'm a little confused about the bulb outs. Are they on all four corners or just the corner?
No,
where
it's just the corner, it's just the one corner.
Yeah, where the corner of the project.
Exactly, yes.
You're going to be seeing today, remember they had an issue with the lift. We wanted to try and find a way to make it a little less conspicuous. So they're going to bring in, I had a discussion with them, and they're going to bring in a couple different alternatives that you can look at and see if there's something that strikes a chord with you.
Thank you.
And I have no further announcements.
I would like to announce I need to leave at 6, but I hope we don't get there. The next item of business is subcommittee reports.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Drury.
Committee for 34 West Victoria met on the 24th at 8:30 here in the building of Commissioner Adams, Commissioner Miller, and Commissioner Drury. We discussed the Victoria Street opening at the market, the access to the northeast corner of the market opening from the Arlington, the opening of Victoria, particularly to the lobby of the living units. Start again?
Perhaps.
Yes. The HLC Subcommittee for the 34 West Victoria met on 9/24. Commissioner Adams, Commissioner Naylor, and Commissioner Drury discussing 34 West Victoria. Discussed the Victoria Street opening at the market, the access to the northeast corner coming from the Arlington, the opening from Victoria to the lobby of the living units, and the northwest corner of the market. We discussed the openings, and we are assuming that solutions will be offered, although it was, I think, a bit contentious.
I just wanted to add to that because I know there are members here who were concerned about the lobby in that view court. I will say that, at the subcommittee, we're basically asking them to develop that lobby because the lobby is going to remain there and it cannot be moved. To develop the lobby in as transparent a manner as possible, which they're doing, but also in a way that will, in some way, enhance the view to the balcony on the Arlington. If it must be there and that bridge must be there, then it should at least enhance the view to the landmark that we are concerned about. So that is the direction that we gave. And we are slated to meet again on October the 8th. And that's how that was discussed for
And
quite a while.
Commissioner, I would like to also add that we discussed the northwest corner of the market. It's of particular importance because of the edifice of the west facade of the Arlington Theater, and I think our comments were generally that the architecture of that back of market needs to be, if it can't be moved back to open up that whole view, it needs to at least be some sort of an architectural conformity to what's behind it. At this point, the plans that were brought to us, there was none. And so it's I think, as crucial a place in that project as anything. And they did widen the opening, that angled opening toward the Arlington from southwest to northeast to 31 feet glass to glass, 31 feet 7 inches glass to glass. So they're making progress, best we can say, I think, and hopefully the 8th of October will see some further progress.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any more subcommittee
Well,
reports?
I just would like to make a quick comment on the sign committee, which we had the two of us reviewing the signs in UPV this morning. And there was some discussion about maybe the 10-inch height limit for letters was really not necessary, and I said, I beg to differ.
Oh.
pointed out that the second largest letter back
Yeah.
there is the 10-inch letter. And it seems to me adequate in view of the fact that the signs on the freeway, the letters are 6 inches
Yeah,
and intended to be read from cars, okay?
yeah.
So I think I made
Thank you,
position
yes.
clear.
10 is, I can see it, my eyes are terrible. Thank you. Let's go to the first item of business, which is the Historic Structures Report for 1303 State Street. I think we'll take a,
We don't have post-Hazeltine to defend. Should there be any questions, I can make a comment on the report, but I'd like to have them here to defend if you've got
I
any
would
specific
too.
questions.
Let's give them a couple of minutes here because I was just rereading, these notes, and it is good if the applicant were here. We actually say that the applicant's presence is required. If it's not present, the item will be postponed indefinitely.
We have quite a few minutes before it's scheduled to be heard.
Yeah. I think we... All right, let's be on break until 1:45, which is when it is scheduled to be. Couple of minutes.
We've waited longer for some applicants who we haven't had on the phone, so.
That's where the breakdown is. Normally I prefer that the consultant prepares the report, submits the 13 copies, and then we can, tell them when they're going to be on the agenda after we've reviewed them. So this one a little different.
Post Hazeltine knows that when they submit they're on the next agenda unless I tell them otherwise.
But I think- but
Whereas
they're saying
Richard
that-
didn't realize that, and I didn't think that I needed to.
Yeah, he should have
past
told, he
that.
should have told them that they're on, so that's where the,
Well, it's time for an M&M break.
I believe we have Mr. Limon
Yeah,
who would
Madam
like
Chair.
to speak.
I'm Limon, Senior Planner. I just wanted to give you all an advisory that we are going to proceed to the Ordinance Committee to amend the sign ordinance to deal with the revised, reconstituted sign review process. I don't think so. The way we're characterizing it is temporary. So we all know that recessions are temporary, and we are trying to respond to the budgetary cutbacks and staffing level cutbacks. And I don't know if Luis has an opinion about whether it's working adequately. We believe it's still working, functioning in a efficient and detailed manner. We have our volunteers that are coming in and doing a consent calendar review, and we believe we can survive this period and allow these signs to be reviewed in the manner they're being done now. What I'm concerned, as we all are concerned about, is if the activity picks up, whether or not we could still absorb the time frames that we've selected. Because if we do get busier, I will certainly be one of the first people that will say, let's go back to try to get these staffed correctly to deal with this.
Staff is doing as much work as before.
Well, there is the ability now that, without getting into a longer discussion, since it's not agendized, for the person that was originally staffing the sign committee to be devoted to sign enforcement. And that is that we're being able to quickly respond to violations on a moment's notice sometimes. And the person that's doing the enforcement is now more aware of the sign ordinance, having been staffing the sign ordinance. It's actually working fairly well. So we think that it's actually an improvement on enforcement. It's sort of a give and take. And hopefully, again, it doesn't become long-term like Luis is concerned about. So if, Luis, if you're intending to support or comment on the changes, that would be the time to go forward on the 12th. Right. And also, we are taking this opportunity to make some additional ordinance amendments, primarily focused on amendments that would increase our ability to do sign enforcement. And over the years, we've noticed that there's some new technical innovations that people are bringing to signage, including audio and visual components. And we're trying to put restrictions on those uses, very clear in the ordinance, as well as I think the other things that involve auto lube repair bays that put banners within the bays. They put them 4 feet back, and currently under the ordinance, that's an exemption. So we're going to try to tighten those things up. So I think it's going to be an improvement also on that end. So just heads up.
Thank you.
And we'll pass along the staff report to the commissioners so they're aware of the report.
One quick item, I know it's not on the agenda, this discussion isn't, but the banners are what have really gotten out of hand, more than anything. Is there a way of curtailing this through contacting banner manufacturers or something to make them more aware that...
Mr. Sharp, we've actually had banner sign companies inquire with the city on how to legalize them. I mean, they're actually contacting us because they know that they're limited, and the business owners get upset because they pay for the banner and they're told by the city that it's not legal, and then the
Banner company should tell them they can't make them.
right that there's a self-interest there, but obviously they want to sell banners whether they think they're illegal or not. But
Well, there are a lot of things people would like to sell.
yeah, so we're actually getting more inquiries on relaxing sign standards because businesses are suffering, or they're claiming that there is a
see.
recessionary impact. So we're trying to resist that effort, but we are on a complaint basis still. So, Mr. Sharp, if you see a banner, the way to get it down is to file that complaint, and then we'll go out there in a more timely, effective manner, because we don't do the sweeps like we used to. We just don't have the capacity to do a wide enforcement range like that. That's all I could respond to that issue.
Is there a limit
they're not allowed, period. And the problem, Mr. Sharp is correctly noting, is once one goes up, another business tends to want to do something, duplicate that. And then we get into a sort of a mass installation. So the quicker we go out there to take them down, the quicker we prevent them. There's a difference between a grand opening or opening sign. There are some flexibilities for temporary signage. But the problem is that we do have a very restriction overall on banners, and so the signs become more of a banner-like grand opening sign rather than just announcing the opening. So it's always a challenge to. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaime. I believe our applicant is here for 1303. I'd like to reopen item number 1 for the Historic Structures Report for 1303 State Street. Oh,
Okay, Madam
no one's
Chair.
had time to. Okay. Will you give your name for the record?
I'm Tim Hazeltine with Post Hazeltine Associates.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
staff does have a comment or two. This building at 1303 State is an unusual situation in that we have one building, one structure that sits on 3 individual lots. So this is one of the 3 individual lots. It's the applicant, and they want the center of the building. And they want to do some remodeling in order to accommodate a railroad museum, which this building is a Kem Weber building. It's designed in the streamlined modern style. I think it's really an appropriate use for that style of architecture, being that the trains through the 20s and 30s were so so designed with such streamlined features on them. I do have one comment on page 36. Top paragraph, second line down, beginning with streamlined modern. I'd just like to insert the word style before and. So streamlined modern style, and as a work of the internationally renowned architect and designer Kem Weber.
Okay.
Staff has reviewed the report and agrees with the conclusions which indicate that the proposed project will not negatively impact this potential historic resource. And we have Tim Hazeltine of Post Hazeltine Associates present to answer any questions that you might have on the report.
Thank you. Tim, is there anything you want to add to, or anything you want to point out for us? Or?
I think it's on. Oh,
All-
thank you, Don. We did work extensively with the client in terms of it was quite a long process in trying to find a way to accommodate a wider door on the front of the building that would meet the universal access requirements, but wouldn't remarkably change the street facade, and also to allow the type of use that they're proposing, but not change the overall feeling of the street facade, which is basically the emphasis on the glazing with the projecting canopy that extends the length of the 2 storefronts. There are more alterations, as you probably noted on the rear elevation, and it was just our feeling that the rear elevation does not have the type of historic significance of the street facade, which of course faces the major public thoroughfare. So we were, in a sense, more accommodating to alterations to that elevation if it would preclude more extensive changes to the street facade.
I see. Thank you. Are there any questions from the commission? Ooh. I'm sorry. I should have asked for public comment first, and that would be Mr. DeForest wishes to speak.
Okay. I remember, first place, I don't know where I was as a child. I certainly went by that intersection thousands of times, and I always thought there was something there, but maybe, but you find out, did you, so I wonder where the city directories checked? Was it definitely a vacant parcel? I thought there was something there, but maybe my memory is playing tricks on me. Secondly, I think when this streamlined modern building was proposed and went in, it was not appreciated by everyone. There was, because there were those, and I think Pearl Chase was one of them, as I recall, wanted the historic, or the then not quite as historic Spanish revival continued to the on State Street to Victoria Street, and so as a redo of this building, should we consider the guidelines of El Pueblo Viejo? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the commission?
Mr. Hazeltine, is the glazing that's existing, is that the original window arrangement and entrances to the other two buildings up from Christian Science Reading Room, that, as far as we know?
As far as we know from looking at older photographs, the permit history, the only significant change to this State Street facade appears to have been the removal of the planter, which took place, I believe, in the mid to late 80s. I don't remember the exact year.
That curved planter?
That was right in front of the Christian Science Reading Room. And it's interesting because the building was designed with the elevations of the street front sort of ratcheting out so that if you were standing at the corner and looking up, you could actually see both sets of street fronts. And that was designed very specifically with that in mind, which is sort of interesting.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
on that subject, I'd also like to point out that we do have the original plans out in the archives, and that I was expecting to see that the Christian Science Reading Room was an alteration because it's got those small windows while everything else has got a large glazing. But actually, those are original to the building, those small windows. And the building, I guess it's one nod to the Hispanic architecture, is that tile roof at the mezzanine up there, the mezzanine level. But the building has become, even though it's not in the Hispanic style, it has become historic in its own right, being a work of Kem Weber, and that we just don't have streamlined modern examples of architecture in Santa Barbara. There's only two that I'm aware of, and this is one of them.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the commission?
I have a couple comments.
All right, let's move to comments unless there are other questions. Let's move to comments.
On page 6, you're talking about the history as Mr. DeForest was, and it says about 7 lines up from the bottom. It appears, however, that the station was never built. You're talking about Standard Oil. That doesn't tell me whether it was built or not, unless I'm not reading it correctly.
There was a gas station on every corner.
But may I respond? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I believe the permit was actually, it appears that it was not built. We couldn't find any indication that it actually had been built. The permit is in the file. And so I suppose we were overly cautious, but the fact that there was the permit in the file, we thought perhaps it had been built and it only existed for a very short period of time, but we couldn't find any indication of that.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Oh, I think Mr. Sharp still has more, right?
Sorry.
You have
And on
several
page
comments?
32, the third bullet down under 10.2.1 reads, the brushed concrete aggregate walls found under the, I think you meant to say bush hammered
Yes.
concrete aggregate. Other than that, it's a fascinating thing to read.
We will revise that.
Thank you. Mr. Drury?
Well, I'm just going to, I remember only a service station where,
The restaurant on Arlington Avenue, that was a 76 station, so they built that. I don't remember the service station where the Christian Science Reading Room is.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments regarding the report
I'll make a motion to accept the report.
I'll second that.
as amended? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's, sometimes these little process things happen. The next item will be the concept review for 1303 State Street.
You got three of them?
Do you want any extras of those reports back? Yeah. Sorry. Did you want that?
No, I don't.
Do you want yours?
I'm holding on to mine. Will you introduce yourself for the record? And
Richard Redmond from Edwards and Pittman Architects.
thank you. Uh-huh. I don't really have any comments regarding this, so start in with your presentation.
Brand new. I think I'll start first with the State Street elevation. And we have actually moved the front door out from the existing location. The reason we did this was to try to not impact this existing wall. We were planning on cutting it and then tying into the existing corner at this point, so that this door and wall actually can fit in as a brand new bush hammered wall without affecting actually the existing ones down on the State Street side. We were planning on putting a rooftop HVAC unit up here that won't be any higher than the parapet, maybe 2-3 inches. As a guess, it's brand new smidge. In the back, there's actually going to be, we've actually moved out the wall. Currently, I believe it's on a diagonal in the back. And we're proposing to move this wall out flush with the property line and then taking an angle with a new meter location, actually going back to the Christian Science building at that point. The idea is to get kind of a rear entry in there, plus accommodate a handicap bathroom in that corner. Now upstairs, we are proposing to put two units on the roof that are part of a split system. And I'm just guessing that you might want a screen, but we haven't proposed any screen at this point. And I believe that's all the exterior changes that we're proposing. So, this is the HVAC location. And there's actually going to be two units up here for a split system. This will give you an idea of what the impact would be on State Street. We've tried to keep it to a minimum to get the door in.
Are there any questions from the commission? If there are no questions, can we go to comments? If there are no comments? Oh, yes, Mr. Drury.
It seems like I don't know how much space is allowed for the pedestrian walkway of the Arlington. It won't impact that.
No.
Because there's that 34 West Victoria is going to be your neighbor.
Right.
So and that's, I think, anything that can be done to improve that look would be welcome. Thank you.
Well, we're still planning on putting a bush hammered wall back at that location. We're just not going to have the big window back there that currently exists.
If there are no comments, I'll look for a motion. We're here for a concept. Odd meeting.
Well, I'm just concerned about those, in the units on the rear
Well, these are actually existing, these two. And they
No, I
actually
was
put a
talking
new
about
door in
your
here, but,
rooftop.
oh, for the screening up here. Currently, there's a unit right here that's exposed, that's on
yeah,
the
there are a
existing
lot of
roof.
really
Perhaps
cute
you have
things up there.
photographs of that rear elevation which would show what's,
Are they separate? Yes.
Yeah, they should be.
why don't you walk us through what we can see in terms of existing and what you think yours is going to look like?
I suppose this is probably the best one. Looking from a distance, you can see this existing unit on top of this roof. And we're proposing 2 more units here. The bougainvillea has currently been cut back.
You're saying this little thing up here?
These are existing. It's the unit down here on the lower one. You can see one here on the adjacent building, which is part of their air conditioning system. And then we're proposing to put 2 more like it, except I'm sure that we'd have to put some sort of a screen up there. Unless you're willing to live with it like that.
Wishful thinking.
I know, I kind of thought that.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
But a
So
screen
yes,
is-
this is a better photograph of,
Yeah, a screen is not going to be obscure. I mean, it's going to stick out quite a ways from the building. Yeah, you can see that existing unit there.
yeah. This is a
Right.
very good photograph.
So I think the condominiums, if the project goes forward as is, facing that too, because how much you can, everything existing condition.
Are there any other comments? If there are no comments, I'm still, public comment has emerged.
Thank you.
Mr. DeForest.
Thank you. I just want everybody to remember that with what you're working on down the street on Victoria Street, that Paseo, the original Paseo that backs these stores, buildings on State Street, and they were meant to go both ways, so you could enter from the Paseo and from the State Street side, and that's sort of been lost in the intervening years. But now with this new project, this is going to be a much more important. That Paseo and the whole area is going to achieve more importance in it. And I don't think people, especially the buyers of the condos, want to look at air conditioning devices and things on the roof. So one needs to consider the upgrading of the Paseo and Victoria side of the building. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I've been concerned about this pass-through for years, and I've talked to people who had businesses there, one thing and the other, and it was intended so that people could be driven up to the Arlington and you know, to the front door and get out there, and then the car would go on through. So I always have felt that it was a very important thing, and it's been so neglected. That's just a comment.
Thank you. Can we look at that upper floor section just for a minute, do you mind? And Don, do you have a comment? that the unit?
Yes.
Oh.
And talking with our mechanical engineering, actually needs 2 units up here, so.
Oh.
What if we were to continue it 2 weeks for Richard to come back with a screening solution for that rear condensing unit? Or
He's
2
going to need
of them?
2. Would you like to make that motion?
Yes, if that's okay with the applicant, if you think it's a reasonable. All right, I'll make a motion for a 2-week continuance for the architect to study and present a screening of the added air conditioning units that will be on that low flat roof.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That motion carries.
Okay, thank you.
The next item of business, flip my pages, is 710 Anacapa Street, and we're a bit early.
We're waiting on Rob Fowler to start the presentation. I can get started, or we can wait your choice.
Why don't we get started if you can present your aspect, and he can chime in when we need landscape. So we are on item number 3, final review for 710 Anacapa Street.
You want to use that set? That's fine.
Wow. Oof. This is final approval. Development plan approval findings were made on November 12th, 2008.
Okay. Hopefully Rob will get here in the next 10 minutes.
Okay.
I'm Scott Hopkins from Piker Group Architects, and of course we're applying for final approval for working drawings on this project. I will briefly walk you through the working drawings. Again, there's 2 structures here. There's a new residence with commercial space below, and then the charming historic cottage that's getting repositioned on the site. You don't seldom see this too often, but the square footages and heights are exactly the same from the preliminary approval to the final working drawings. I'll just kind of walk you through the site plan for starters. I'm looking at sheet A 1.10. Essentially the same site plan. There are a few things that came up during the working drawings that I'll point out. We have 2 condensers located on the south side of the property. When Rob does his presentation, you'll see that these are adequately screened with landscaping. The historic report mentioned that the existing railings on the cottage were not authentic and had recommended those be removed. So we have a new railing design for the steps of the cottage. And to bring the stone steps up to code, we've got a railing design for those stone steps as well. And I'll walk you through the details for that. And for ADA access, of course, as in the previous drawings, we've got a handicap ramp, or accessible ramp, and there's a railing design for that as well. The stone wall all remains existing. In the previous drawings, we were leaving the parkway and sidewalk untouched. We've hence decided, since there's some trenching happening through here for sprinklers for the parkway, that we're pouring a new sidewalk. And we may trim the roots of this tree a bit because it's pushed up the sidewalk in that location. There is no curb at the handicap ramp. This is just a stone paving pattern underneath the handrail there. And the handrail breaks, so you can walk forward to the residence if you choose, or you can turn the corner and the ramp continues. When Rob shows up, we've enhanced the design of the fountain at the trash structure a bit. And there were no previous drawings of the trash structure here, so we've detailed that out and shown exactly what it's going to look like. We'll move on to, sorry, on the same sheet are the trash enclosure drawings. On the back side, there's facing the front door, there's a panel for electrical and things of that nature. There's a fountain in front, and you'll see in Rob's drawings, he's altered that in the last minute, and I think it's slightly enlarged, the fountain facing the main courtyard. And then access to the trash in the back. So the floor plan is essentially identical. We've made a few enhancements. I'm looking at sheet A2.10. At the entry, we've added some decorative tile niches on either side. We had the room to do that, so we added that. This is Carlos Adama. He's the owner of the property. And that's detailed here, adjacent to that. Other than that, the floor plan is more or less identical. So we'll just keep moving along here. Suzette's got the color boards in front of her.
I was just looking for the tiles that were being proposed for that niche.
I don't think those have been selected yet. It's kind of a late-breaking detail, but good point. We should present those as well. The second floor, the railing design, guardrail design has been enhanced. We've added, it was very simple steel rail. We've added some more detail to that, enhanced that a bit. And then you'll see on the elevation, we've got some decorative fireplace exhaust covers that I'd like to get your comments on. Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay. And the illustrious Rob Fowler has arrived. But essentially the floor plan, all the fenestration is identical to what you've seen before. The roof deck is the same square footage, and I think we've added a small kitchenette and barbecue, but it's completely hidden from view from the street. It's completely within the confines of the roof deck well, so there's nothing that projects above it. There's door and window schedule. We'll move on to more important things. The elevations, A4.10. So,
excuse me, I know you keep saying, and I'm sure it's true, that nothing has changed. Can we see the last set of plans that we have approved so that we may compare?
I have a set. Yeah, oh, here we go. And in planning, we have a set as well.
Right, 11 by 17s are great.
11 by 17.
Okay.
So the one caveat is the tower formerly had a scallop detail similar to this wall. Mm-hmm. And in the last meeting, there was some discussion that maybe wasn't warranted, so we're taking that out. So you see that this formerly had a scallop detail. And the more we looked at it and lived with the design, we felt that it wasn't necessary. So there's that subtle change. The guardrails were just a very simple run-of-the-mill steel rail. We've added some additional detail there as well. The chimney fireplace covers are shown here. And the flower boxes have a detail that matches the guardrail detail. The flower box holders. I'm trying to rack my brain for anything else we may have done. Oh, we've got overflow scuppers from the roof deck, one in the front, one in the back. Hopefully they'll never have water coming out of them. If they do, you should notice it. We've got it's a decorative copper gargoyle that sticks out from the facade at this location, and this is a former set at this location right here. You won't see them on the former set, they weren't shown. And apologize, there's a drafting error here. These two lines shouldn't exist. This is all the same thing on the west elevation.
Does this line exist?
That line does not exist.
Okay.
If you look at the detail, it's unfortunate.
Does this line exist?
That line does not exist. Again, my apologies.
Why don't you continue with your
Okay.
presentation? I
Sure.
will have questions, however, on these elevations. Thank you.
Certainly. So, to the best of my knowledge, those are the things that have changed on the elevations. You can see the exterior guardrail details here. It's kind of an alternating sun-moon pattern. And these are detailed here in full scale of what those will look like. Now, this is the interior stairway. It's I guess you'll be able to see that through the windows. It's quite nice and elaborate, and we think it'll be a fun space to be. The section heights are the same. At the, not that you can see it from the exterior, but we've added kind of a plant shelf along the exterior, or the inside rim of the roof deck well.
And where would I see the section heights in this previous set?
Well, you can see the plate heights and the overall heights stay the same.
But no sections, I see.
I don't think we have sections for preliminary approval.
Okay.
But there's still 9-foot-1 plate heights. You can see the height to the roof deck is the same. I think those are on the elevations. All worthwhile things to check, of course. I'll just keep moving along, speedy pace here. 2x6 exterior stud walls, so we can get some recessed slope with the windowsills. Very traditional Santa Barbara detailing. Interior elevations, too closely. You can see this is that scallop detail facing Paradise. How that gets detailed. Awnings, handsome windows above the garage, and some of the, this is into the elevator shaft, so it's a decorative vent, but you see how that's detailed as well. If you want to stop and scrutinize some more, let me know. I'll keep moving along. So here's the roof deck detail. From the exterior, it looks like a traditional top tile or cap tile roof. There's no difference between this and any other roof you might see. The guardrail and balcony details, and more of the plant shelves here. This is the edge detail of the wall facing the Paradise, with the tile wrapping around the edge of that. I'll stop, let me know. And assortment of roof details here. Here's that fun little copper gargoyle for the overflows. You can get into the merits of that if you like. Copper downspouts and gutters, 6-inch copper gutters. Copper leader boxes. The roof venting is done with O'Higgins, so those are actually metal and they get painted out to look like the roof decks. You see that around town. If you look closely, you can spot them. Sometimes they'll actually, I'm not sure if they can, but sometimes I've seen it where they put actual roof tiles over this, although it's not recommended by the manufacturer. Keep moving on. Interior and exterior wall details. These are interesting. These are the window details. Again, you can see the proportions of the splayed windows, the detailing around the edges of that. Door details as well. Very traditional Santa Barbara details. These are fireplace details on the interior. So let's move on to the existing building. describe what we're doing here. The second sheet in, we've reproduced the entire historic report on the drawings, so the contractor is aware of exactly what's required and what's recommended in the historic report. So it's very clear what needs to be saved and what basically everything needs to be saved. That's savable. There's a demo plan on the next sheet showing exactly what's being removed, all of the non-historic structures being removed. The bay window that isn't historic is being removed. This doorway is being removed and being replaced with a window. Eventually, this area here will match the existing window, the historic window. And then, as was shown previously, the stone wall is being relocated adjacent to the building here to make room for the handicap ramp. The existing structure here, you can kind of see what's being replaced. Again, there is a basement, CMU foundation basement. This building is essentially being moved out of the way temporarily. They build the basement wall and they move the building back on top of this new basement foundations. Again, you can see the bay windows being removed. We're adding new handrails here. You'll see the detail for that shortly. And then where this is all covered up with existing structure that's being removed, we're replicating the details from the front on the back. So, moving along. I'll get to this foundation detail. It's an important detail momentarily. But again, you can see there's a basement. We are building a new floor structure, and I'll tell you why in just a sec. Essentially, the structural report, the foundation is all but shot. And even though it's not a very long span, there's an existing beam and column line down the center of the structure. So it's really not feasible to save the floor structure. So the intent is to, the way they do these is they kind of run beams through the house and then bolt them to the existing studs. And they pick up the entire structure that way without the floor structure. And then they'll move it temporarily, and the new basement foundation is done. They'll set it down on top of that. The grade varies, although it's showed here as it would be to match the existing structure from the front. On the back, it slopes up, of course, so that we can get ADA access. So in that sense, it makes sense to bring the foundation wall all the way up to the floor and then hang the joists over the top of the CMU foundation. So that's our game plan at this point for how to move the structure and keep it intact. You can see the new rail detail here. It's always kind of interesting how you decide on what that ought to look like. Should it be something that contrasts with the existing, or very Victorian like the existing? We kind of took the middle of the road. It's got some detail, but it's not too elaborate. We've got more of a standard Santa Barbara handrail, the Blum handrail top that gets doweled into the existing foundation wall, the foundation or stone wall. That's shown exactly as it is built right now. These are the lamps of choice for the exterior. Again, those have all the standard stuff, the double CD glass, and color correction for the fluorescent. I'm going to pass things over to Rob to talk about the landscape drawing.
And before you do start,
Sure.
Mr. Fowler, I just wanted to read, before Mr. Fowler starts, I wanted to read the comments that we had from the previous minutes. It has been a while. Beyond the initial, we like, and it goes beyond, our specific comments were the following landscape comments are carried over from previous meeting minutes and are a condition for final approval. Simplify the palette, particularly the canopy trees at the street. Study providing more appropriate tree species as opposed to the clumping bamboo. Correct the lawn substitute designation on the plans. Provide vines on the roof deck walls, and lower water usage plantings shall be used. In addition, on the previous preliminary review hearing, in terms of the building, The mass, bulk, and scale continue to be acceptable. The tower should remain in the proportion as shown on the current plans, and it should have a low slope roof as presented. At least one commissioner preferred the proposed ornamentation of the tower and the extension of that ornamentation to the property line elevation. The garage opening of not having a door is of concern, and this issue needs to be resolved. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, this is, I'm Robert Fowler, landscape architect. I had been working with HLC along the way when we were doing the preliminary design on this, and then the very last meeting, I was not at that meeting because the issues seemed to be much bigger, involving the architecture and the whole project itself. And so I'm not sure entirely of the involvement of some of those comments, but I've tried to address them as much as possible. I know issues like at one point I had a lawn parkway, and that's been pulled out. The one issue has been that's still, I guess, up for discussion. And, when I went and started reading the historic report, which wasn't, I guess, fully evolved when I first started doing this project, it talked about the Myers Cottage, and it talked about the history, the historical landscape, which I've identified a few key sentences out of it, referred to having a couple of the building being flanked by some palm trees and having a lawn that wrapped around the front of the project. So I looked at the notion of trying to at least restore and bring back some aspects of that. It's hard from the pictures. I'm not sure what kind of species the palms were. I can identify them, but kind of either the turn of the century palms might have been a Canary Island date palm, or might have been a California fan palm. And so the notion was to come in here with a California fan palm, which I kind of thought would be a nice tree that would respond to the historical quality of this building, and that would still kind of work with, more of the styles of the HLC district. So that's what I'm proposing in the corner. I thought would be a nice way to kind of anchor this corner. We've got this huge existing camphor tree in the parkway, which really kind of makes trying to flank with dueling palm trees really impractical, because they would kind of grow into each other and the palm tree wouldn't read. So basically, but I did want to try to bring back the lawn, even though because of the historical significance of it, I am open if that's an issue. I am open. We are, we've talked to Carlos. We've talked about, we would go down to some either buffalo grass or some, synthetic turf, or some, just go to decomposed granite or some other lawn substitute if that's the preference of the board. As far as that, as far as the bamboo, I pulled all the bamboo out, and in trying to kind of develop some perimeter screening and massing of the structure and back. I've got a very vertical jacaranda here in the courtyard, olive tree over here on this corner. I'm introducing some Washingtonia robusta, which kind of really lend themselves to kind of giving some massing up against the taller parts of the building. Some Italian cypress over on the big blank walls over here. The idea on the hardscape is we're introducing as our first preference in here. I've been working with the civil engineer on some of the, the best practice issues, and we are proposing kind of a tumbled Belgard paver in here that's permeable on the flat parts, and then non-permeable on the slope portion of the driveway. There is brick that's being proposed for the handicap ramp and for the kind of entry and patios over here. There's kind of a little flagstone being brought up, and stone being brought up in the front of Myers Cottage, and then some flagstones set in the lawn around the back to kind of create a little casual little patio area over there. So, and there's some roses being introduced, lavender. Those are kind of some of the main pieces of it, but that's about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment on this item? I think there is.
Yes, I handed in a slip.
Yep,
Somewhere it's buried in there.
I've got it. Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. First, I want to Pam Bear, who's been active in trying to preserve the Carpenter Gothic Cottage, which luckily is being preserved, wanted me to impart some of her views. She says, as property owners, and she owns the property across the street, the little, I don't know what you call it, building just across the street. And she says that she feels that the project, and especially these condo, or whatever it is, building, resident, in the impact, an adverse impact on the 700 block of Anacapa Street, which is in El Pueblo Viejo. So many people stopped by the table when we were gathering names for the petition. They didn't want to see development there and felt the cottage was set perfectly as it is. It doesn't seem as if people like members of the HLC who are entrusted to see that the historic nature of El Pueblo Viejo is maintained should approve a huge inappropriate development on a postage stamped size parcel and move an historic iconic structure. She also was concerned about the parking. There are two, besides the people that live in the house, I don't know how many people there are the people that are going to occupy the cottage. Where are they all going to park? And she's afraid because that would impact it. Street parking is, on that section of Anacapa Street, is almost impossible now. Where extra cars go to park? Then I have comments. I too am concerned about the new structure's visual impact. Is the roof deck with its tower really necessary? I don't think a roof deck with the umbrellas and all the stuff that's going on there is going to enhance the EPV. Couldn't the barbecue area be in the patio area between the two buildings? The tower is going to rise up almost 60 feet from Anacapa Street. Going to look like because of the change in elevation. Then I want to comment on the west the west facade, which is
right here.
That's the east facade. That's the back of. No. Oh, there it is. I'm sorry, I didn't see. West facade. I think this window, all these same-size windows is not providing anything, a visual impact to. It looks very ordinary for those who will be able to see it from Anacapa Street. Also, additionally, I thought we were going to get another canopy tree on Anacapa Street, and I don't see that in the plans. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to questions from the commission.
I have a question.
Yes.
The handrail on the cottage, is that made of metal?
The cottage is made of wood.
Okay. That's
Wood,
good.
yeah.
That's good. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Mr. Drury?
On the west elevations of the yet to be built, are there any, there's opportunities, but are there any plans for awnings?
Well, we're not showing them now. We could certainly provide them.
I'm just thinking that for the people who live there, it might be, the west day like we've had on Monday, it would be very nice to have had shade if
Anything, right.
Yeah, and then in the wintertime, the south elevation should be provided with the same kind of sun protection, I think. That's a comment or a question.
I think it's a comment. Following your question. Are there any questions?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
do we have a sample or a cut sheet of the paver? What that looks like and what that color is?
Oh, the paver?
The paver, the permeable paver.
Yeah, no, it's,
I know it's Belgard, and I know you've selected a color.
it's a tumbled,
Yeah.
how the tumbled ones.
Okay, and then do you know what percent of the total landscape area is shown in lawn, approximately?
No, I don't have that percentage. I know that, I mean, had the historical component not been involved, I would not have even picked on it. It was simply a matter of, after doing some research that, can people hear me? It was a matter of doing, see, I've been here before. It was just simply a matter of, like I started to say, had there not been a historical component to the project showing, with that language on L1, referencing that the lawn was what was historically there, I wouldn't have even picked lawn. And so I started.
You don't know if it's less than 20%? Okay.
Yeah, I would say it's looks like to me it's somewhere in that vicinity. I mean, just looking at the square footage of all the.
Are there any other questions? I do have questions for the architect about the elevations. This door is not the same as what I see here.
Oh, you're right. Good eye.
Let's keep going. This window is not the same as the one I see here.
Because of the mullion breakup?
The height in relation to the roof, the number of lights in the window.
I think that may have been an issue with, inside of that window is an interior stair. I think we may have proportioned it slightly to accommodate that stair.
This roof is not showing here. This window is no longer here.
Okay.
These splays on this window are not showing here. So that's my quick cursory look at changes.
I apologize for not bringing that to your attention. I didn't notice that. It's been a while since we...
Although, like on the bare wall there is substantial landscaping to kind of address that.
I understand. I'm simply looking closely because you seem to be very, very sure that there were no changes.
Sorry
And
for
so for me,
sounding-
it was sort of, okay.
Sorry for sounding overconfident.
Are there any other questions from the commissioners? I'll go to comments now, please.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
On the trash enclosure, I'm just having a little bit of a problem with it because it seems so celebrated and so apparent, and it seems like it's just a building sitting out in the middle of a parking area or whatever, and it seems like it needs more integration to the actual building. With respect to the front yard landscape, I think a more human scale palm tree would be appropriate there rather than the California fan palm, just because it gets so tall. You have the alternate, the Brahia armata, but then you've labeled it queen palm. So, okay, but I would prefer the Brahia.
Or I would, citrus was another kind of like
citrus,
direction.
I think that California fan palm is just going to end up looking like a bit of a telephone pole there. And we have the Mexican fan across
I
the street.
understand. That's a good comment. So.
Oh, no, those are the California fan across the street. The lawn, I don't have a problem with, even if it is a little bit more than 20%, but you'd probably have to get an exemption from Public Works on that. And buffalo grass or UC Verde or something like that, where it's lower water use, might be appropriate. I also think that that lawn should come right out to that stone wall and get rid of the roses, because that's kind of how it would have been done. It would have come right up to that wall. And I like the idea of having the lawn sort of at eye level and not interrupted by the roses. However, you would have to address your screening on your backflow preventer in a way. Because I think you've got them right here, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, can I,
So I'm not going to, I like the lawn. I would actually encourage a little bit more of it. Then the parkway, I think that could be broken up just a little bit more. Maybe there's some spacing in between the groupings of the formium with some decomposed granite or full gravel or something, so that it's not a solid planting of formium. Don't use synthetic turf. That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
thanks.
Are there any other comments? This is here for final.
I just would like to second my thing on my favorite thing, backflow preventers. That's got to be screened somewhere.
Yeah,
Okay, because,
I agree with that.
I see a new building in Plano. Okay,
Or the gas meters sticking in front.
right, thank you.
Could I give you some comfort on that, please? There's actually, there's an existing fence that's buried in a trumpet vine that we're proposing to maintain, and so it actually, it screens from the south side, which I know that's not the direction of traffic, but then that was all part of, what was there before was, of course, there's a picket fence, and so you would need, if the lawn was to come up to the edge, for instance, then you would need some kind of handrail situation. So you either need the picket fence back and the lawn going up to that edge, or that's where the roses kind of provided, some kind of security of people stepping off and hiding those backflows. So,
Green.
okay.
I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it myself, too.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Drury.
is it appropriate to your final approval of the plans that don't reflect, or that there are errors in?
Well, my comment about this is normally I wouldn't be really, I mean, it depends on the level of difference between the two. In this particular case, in looking at the ones at least that I have noticed, some I can see were purely not bringing completeness to this preliminary set, as in that roof, which should have been brought over onto this. Some I get the point about why this one might be lower than that one, which it is not here, but I probably can figure out why that happened. So in this particular case, my assessment is that if I would not stop this project from going forward to final, but I absolutely feel very strongly that if these plans in any way had changed from preliminary and you had told me that they had not, I would have stopped you.
My mistake. I wasn't trying to pull the wool over your eyes.
Madam Chair, another comment. We need to see what those pavers look like.
Right.
Typically, we don't accept concrete pavers in El Pueblo Viejo, so be prepared to show something more traditional, if there is such a thing as permeable traditional pavers.
Thank you. Do I have any other comments?
I have a question. The 3 vine pockets have no dimension, 4 actually, I guess, have no dimensions on the site plan. Are they dimensioned anywhere so that we know we're going to get something that is reasonable and not just...
Yeah, it's a good question. Are they on mentioned in the landscape plan?
No, they're not.
They may be on the
find
site
it
plan.
anywhere.
But I like that comment.
Yeah, if they're not big enough, there's no point in doing them.
Exactly.
Yep.
fact, I'm always fighting in that situation to have the footing,
We all are.
to footing be low enough so that when the landscaper gets out there, it isn't concrete in the vine pocket.
That's an excellent point there, not to mention also deficiency in the drawings.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Jacobus?
in Fermina's absence, I'll be Fermina today. It's my understanding, and this was going back to the original beginning of this project, is that when you move the building, you're moving the portion of the building that you're moving, the front portion, that you're going to move that in its entirety. You're not going to strip that down to its studs, like you did at, like the Piker project up in, was that Laguna Court did? Well, we expect the bungalows to be preserved, and they were actually stripped all the way down to the studs and then sort of rebuilt. Can you elaborate on the movement of that building?
Here's the situation. The building right now has no building paper. So drywall and everything are much more exposed to the elements on the inside. The historic report recommends removing the existing siding, storing it, and then reinstalling it. A lot of that siding is rotted that may need to be replaced. So we're kind of up in the air on the best way to do this. Our current thinking is that we...
The historian, I can't remember who he was, engineer, he said to move it, remove all the stuff inside and then put plywood inside and move it, like you say, entirely.
Yeah.
And then once it's
The
set,
plywood would actually
then
say shear
repair
walls.
it.
There are new shear walls that need to be added. And
Yes.
our intent was to add those to the inside of
Inside, yeah, okay.
Inside,
yeah.
correct.
It's a question of whether we can live with the building without any kind of weather barrier, which is never a good idea. Essentially clappered on studs right now. And we're investigating, maybe there's a way we can do that from the inside. It's still not fully investigated at this point. The goal is to keep as much as we can intact, obviously.
Yeah, that's what I'm concerned about. We don't have a loss of the historic material.
Yeah, I'll let
Yeah.
Lynn comment myself.
We do have comments primarily from Mr. Suding, and of course the 5 vine pockets would be part of the landscape as well. I'm going to summarize those comments, though. Oh, yes, we should look at the colors. I'm sorry. You want to present the colors? Talk
Certainly.
about them.
This is, the photocopies can be misleading. This is MCA, Old Santa Barbara blend, very traditional tile in Santa Barbara. The awning colors are kind of a mocha colored, and then the windows are aluminum-clad eagle windows. This is a chip out of their catalog. The garage doors are painted to match the window colors. Kind of a warm off-white stucco. The blue is not dissimilar to the courthouse, probably prior to it being faded courthouse windows. The existing structure, we haven't done any analysis to do micro scraping to find out what the original paint color was. We've gone with something we think looks historical and is pleasing, and the front door is the same blue, the tie-in with at least some partial tie-in with the new structure. And so it's asphalt shingles, white trim, some darker colors in the same family on the sash.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
question. Does the historic structures report indicate anything about paint scrapings or historical colors, Mr. Jacobus?
It's been a number of years since I read the report. I don't remember that it did that. That's something that often comes up at the commission if a paint color is very crucial to a restoration of a building, or if we're dealing with something in the EPV that, it's close and we're just trying to get a more exact fix on it. This building, predates pretty much everything else in the EPV that we've worked on lately. Carpenter's Gothic buildings, I've got a color book upstairs. I could go get that real quick if you wanted to take a quick look at that. Typical Carpenter's Gothic colors. I believe the trim was usually darker than the body of the building in Carpenter's Gothic.
I think you're right, Mr. Jacobus, and I don't think the colors that are proposed are appropriate, so going to need to do some study on that.
It's been
Yeah, we're happy to.
quite as long as I can remember, but that doesn't mean anything. I don't go back to the
Big
time
guys
it
need
was built. Almost, no,
very
not
few.
quite.
Very few Victorian era buildings were actually white. What happened was in the 1950s they became white elephants, and
Yeah.
people just threw white paint over everything, so they didn't have to worry about painting the trim and all the details of it.
Yeah.
They were actually quite colorful and very earthy, and like I say, usually on the Carpenter's Gothic, I'm remembering that the trim is usually darker than the body color.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Drury.
I'd like to add to the comments, there was a question that went to comment about awnings. I think awnings should be used as needed, even possibly on the east facade of the new building, certainly the south and the west. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to summarize the comments. There was a comment of concern regarding the perhaps too individualistic appearance of the trash enclosure and that it was not integrated with the main building. There was a preference that the palm tree in the front, and I don't know what brohias are, but I did do this phonetically, that it be a brohia or a citrus. There was a preference for the, pardon?
Guadalupe and all
You
those.
call it a pindo.
Oh.
Pindo palm, P-I-N-D-O.
Thank you. That the lawn be extended to the stone wall, that the parkway be broken up more, that synthetic turf not be used, that a sample of the Belgard pavers be brought, that the vine pockets as shown should be dimensioned to ensure something lives, and that there be awnings on the west and south and perhaps the east elevations, that the colors be confirmed for their traditional aspect,
Colors of the cottage.
colors that are appropriate for the era, for the cottage. And I will look for
The
a
backflow
motion.
depends.
Oh, the backflow
Prevention.
shall be screened.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, could you add to that paver comment that typically concrete pavers are not approved in the district?
Right.
And then also that the landscape that I can support the use of lawn in the front yard even
Oh, yes,
if it
I did
exceeds
forget that, yes.
even if it exceeds 20%. However, the landscape architect or the applicant will need to get an exemption from Public Works.
I'll assume Gabriela got those.
The use of lawn in the front of a building would be supportable?
Yes.
Yes.
And the concrete pavers are not normally acceptable in this district.
They're not acceptable.
Not at all.
Right.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
It seems there were two opinions on the, with regard to the backflow. I checked the plans a couple days ago when they came in for screening of those two devices. I believe there's one on the front elevation, or the front yard, one on the south side. And they're both screened with rose bushes, and Commissioner Suding wants the lawn to come up to the wall.
That was more of a suggestion. I don't think it necessarily needs to go into the
No,
minutes.
I
I can
think
support the lawn.
Could I
Yeah.
answer that, respond? I mean,
don't wanna hear-
so my thought in response to that is if we were going to extend the lawn, then what I would suggest is there was a picket fence there that maybe we could reintroduce, and that way we could extend the lawn, put a picket fence with either like daylilies on the front side and some vines. That would kind of help with the safety issue of the needing some kind of the drop off, and then also that would also help facilitate the screening. So I could kind of go either way with the roses, or kind of reintroducing a picket fence and extending the lawn and kind of going in the direction that Mr. Suding wanted.
The reason I made the comment was just for see if any of the other commissioners felt strongly about the lawn and the roses, and also to let the landscape architect study that and come up with something. If he wants to keep the roses, I'm fine with that.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
playing for Mina again. On Carpenter's Gothic, you really didn't have the typical picket fence. You actually had what they call a scrollwork fence, where the members of the where the pickets would be, it would be a flat piece of wood that's got scroll, usually
Oh,
some
yeah.
sort of a very simple pattern cut into it.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And so you want to look at some examples of that if you're going to propose the fence rather than something that's strictly picket.
Yeah, there's still a portion of the existing fence there, I believe.
Yeah.
Right, so we would restore that, would be the approach.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
One practical suggestion. On the south elevation, you've got an 18-inch overhang coming along, and 8 inches from the door, where you really need an overhang, it stops. May I suggest that maybe you consider bringing that 18-inch overhang out to cover the door?
Very good idea.
I think it would help break the tower and be a little,
Yes, it would. Yeah.
little more shadow as you see it from the Paradise and so forth. But practicality-wise, it's immeasurable in my book.
Okay, yeah, good suggestion.
Very good suggestion.
Yes, I think we'll make that part of the motion, that the roof should be extended on the south elevation to cover the door which is not protected.
It will break all of it.
I'm looking for a motion.
Well, I just wanted to say, I think we've got quite a few conditions here. I'm not ready to give it final approval today, but it could maybe go to final, to consent.
Would you like to make that motion?
All right. I'll make a motion to continue the final approval of this project to the consent calendar with the comments that have been made.
May I have a second? Second. All those in favor?
Madam Chair,
Oh.
I was just curious, would it be possible to grant it final and send it to consent for details? So you grant it final approval today at this commission and then forward it or continue it for 2 weeks for details?
I don't know. I think that the
Final.
pavers, for one thing, is a pretty
Yeah.
big
Okay,
issue.
I just want to throw that out.
All right.
Thanks.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, it's important that the person doing consent have witnessed this meeting and been in attendance, which means one of us, if I happen to be out of town.
And I think you will be, won't you?
Well, it depends when it comes back.
Oh, that's true.
It was given 2 weeks, so.
We'd
I'll
like
be
to come
out of
back as
town.
soon as
How
possible.
about, or Phil, because he's got most of the issues? or-
I suggest Phil, because there's so many landscape
That's
issues.
He just walked back in, so Commissioner Suter, did you?
You're hired.
You just got nominated. Are you going to be here in 2 weeks? Because it was continued to consent 2 weeks, and Commissioner Sharp is not going to be here. There is a little bit of a time constraint on this. Their preliminary approval expires, well, they have a whole nother month. It expires November 12th, but I always
Okay.
get a little nervous.
I understand.
So would you be able to review this on consent in 2 weeks?
As far as I know, I will be. I will be in town, and I will be able to.
Okay,
Terrific.
great.
And
Thank
by
you.
that time, we'll have colors and all the information will be ready. Forward, because
Good enough.
Thank you.
So they can-
Good.
Do we take any